The flags at NATO headquarters in Brussels are still flying, but for the first time in 77 years, they feel like the banners of a ghost ship. 10 seconds. That was all the time it took for the Brussels ultimatum to be delivered. A single three-sentence memo from the Oval Office that effectively turned the world's most powerful military alliance into a pay-to-play subscription service. We aren't talking about a standard diplomatic disagreement or a debate over budget percentages. We are talking about the total structural deactivation of NATO as we knew it. As of April 11, 2026, Article 5 is no longer an automatic guarantee. It is a conditional contract. Donald Trump hasn't just changed NATO, he has liquidated its soul. The shield that held back the Soviet Union and protected Europe for generations hasn't been broken by a Russian tank. It has been dismantled by an American invoice. And as the world watches the transatlantic divorce unfold, the most terrifying question isn't what Trump is doing now, but who will inherit the wreckage when he finally leaves. To understand the reality of NATO in 2026, we have to look at the transaction of defense. For decades, NATO was built on the sacred promise: an attack on one is an attack on all. It was the insurance policy of the West. But as we have seen with the $35 trillion debt nightmare and the federal liquidation of D.C., the United States is no longer in a position to be the world's benefactor. Under Trump's leadership, the U.S. has moved to a dormant NATO model. The troops are still in Germany, the bases are still in Poland, but the security guarantee is now tied to a strict 3% GDP spending floor. In 2026, if a nation hasn't hit that target, they are officially moved to Tier 2 membership. This means that in the event of a conflict, the U.S. will provide intelligence and logistics, but not kinetic intervention. The shield has become a service-level agreement, and the fine print is written in blood. The simple reality of what happened is a strategic decoupling. While the world was focused on the oil war in the Middle East and the drone strikes on Dubai and Saudi Arabia that occurred earlier today, Trump made the move to regionalize European defense. The Brussels ultimatum was the final blow. It informed the European allies that the U.S. is pivot-ready, meaning that American assets are being moved from the European theater to the Indo-Pacific and the freedom cities in the American heartland. The massive move is the application of the efficiency layer to global geopolitics. Trump's leadership isn't about isolationism, it's about resource optimization. He is treating NATO like a failing franchise that needs to be lean optimized. If Europe wants a security umbrella, they have to build their own. And they have to pay the U.S. for the sovereign AI technology to run it. Why does this matter on a global scale? Because the collapse of the world order we've discussed is being accelerated by the vacuum left at the heart of NATO. For 80 years, NATO was the linchpin of global stability. By making Article 5 conditional, the U.S. has signaled to every adversary on the planet, Russia, China, and the newly emboldened Iran, that the Western Front is open for negotiation. We are seeing a global realignment where Eastern European nations like Poland and the Baltic states are no longer looking to Brussels for leadership. They are building a mini NATO in the East, directly funded by bilateral deals with the U.S. This is geopolitical balkanization. The unified West is being replaced by a series of security tribes, each fighting for their own slice of the American digital shield. Professor Jiang Decodes' analysis of the $35 trillion debt is essential here. He argues that the U.S. cannot afford to be the leader of NATO anymore. In his view, Trump's leadership is a strategic bankruptcy filing. The U.S. is liquidating its global commitments because the interest on the debt has made them unsustainable. This is why Trump is so aggressive about the 3% floor. It's not just about fairness, it's about cost shifting. If Europe doesn't pay for its own defense, the U.S. will simply unplug the machine. The fake stability of the post-war era is over, and the real world of 2026 is a place where you only get the protection you can pay for in cash or compute credits. Now we must look at the what happens next speculation. Who takes over when Trump leaves? The 2028 election is already looming over the NATO landscape, and there are three distinct paths for the post-Trump world. The first is the Vance succession. If J.D. Vance or a similar tech populist takes the mantle, we will see the permanent decoupling of the U.S. from Europe. Vance has been a vocal critic of the old NATO and a champion of the sovereign AI strategy. Under this leadership, NATO would be officially replaced by AUKUS Plus, a maritime, tech-driven alliance focused entirely on the Pacific and the digital choke points. Europe would be left as a strategic buffer zone, managed by an AI-driven border mesh but without a significant American human presence. The second scenario is the European pillar takeover. In this version, France and Poland, the two nations that have most aggressively adapted to the Trump reality, become the new dual engines of European defense. We are talking about the EU army finally becoming a reality out of sheer terror. With the US dormant, Paris and Warsaw would lead a sovereign Europe that uses its own nuclear deterrent and its own sovereign AI to hold back the Russian problem in the East. This would be a multipolar NATO, where the US is an associate member but no longer the commander. This would fulfill the dream of de Gaulle, but it would also mean a much higher tax burden and a more militarized society for every European citizen. The third and most radical scenario is the technocratic merger. As the world order collapses and the efficiency layer takes over, the concept of national armies may begin to fade. We could see the rise of a global defense utility, a private-public partnership where NATO's infrastructure is liquidated and sold to a consortium of tech giants and sovereign wealth funds. In this scenario, defense is a subscription service managed by a neural network of AI generals. You don't vote for a leader of NATO. You buy a security tier from a platform like Aegis Stream. This sounds like science fiction, but in the context of the $35 trillion debt and the Hormuz automation, it is the logical endgame of the fake stability economy. The NATO under Trump era is also defined by the tech war with Canada. By demanding that all NATO allies use verified American hardware for their AI defense systems, Trump has effectively colonized the digital infrastructure of Europe. Canada's attempt to build a sovereign AI is a direct challenge to this digital NATO. If you use Canadian or European code in your tanks, are you still interoperable with the US 7th Fleet? The tech war is the new arms race. In 2026, you don't win a war with more missiles. You win it with lower latency. Trump's leadership has turned NATO into a technical standard as much as a military alliance. If you aren't on the USOS, you are on your own. Consider the oil war context from earlier today. As Iran strikes Saudi Arabia and Dubai, the dormant NATO is facing its first real test. In the old world, a strike on the global oil supply would have triggered an immediate unified NATO response. But today the response is fragmented. Tier 1 nations are coordinating with the US Ghost Fleet in Hormuz, while Tier 2 nations are left to negotiate their own energy security with Turkey and Russia. This is the Trump effect in action. The common defense has been replaced by strategic opportunism. While Riyadh burns, Brussels is arguing over sovereign ID protocols. The shock isn't the war, it's the realization that there is no emergency dial for the West anymore. The dramatic ending to this NATO nightmare isn't a treaty, it's a system log-off. It is the image of a US commander handing the keys to a base in Ramstein to a German officer and saying, "The password is changed every 30 days. Here's the bill." The special relationship has been audited, and it was found to be in the red. Trump's leadership has proven that you cannot have a 21st century empire on a 20th century budget. The $35 trillion debt is the gravity that has pulled the American eagle back to its own nest. Who will take over? The managerial class in Europe is praying for a return to normalcy in 2028, but as Professor Jiang Decodes warns, normalcy is a hallucination. The fake stability cannot be restored once the Article 5 trigger has been pulled. The next leader of the West won't be a person, it will be a protocol. Whether it's called NATO, AUKUS, or the digital front, the future of defense is transactional, automated, and resilient. The era of the protectorate is over. The era of the partner has begun. And in 2026, a partner is someone who brings their own ammo and their own AI. As we reach the conclusion of this script, the shock hook becomes a final warning. The flags at NATO HQ are being lowered because the nation-state itself is being liquidated into the efficiency layer. Trump's leadership is just the software update that made the change visible. When he leaves, the hardware of NATO will still be there, but the software will be entirely different. The transatlantic bond has been replaced by a fiber optic cable, and the spirit of 1949 has been replaced by the math of 2026. The oil war in the Gulf, the tech war in the North, and the liquidation in DC all lead to this moment. NATO isn't dying, it's migrating. It's moving from the physical world of treaties and summits to the digital world of sovereign compute and automated response. Trump is the one who hit the migrate button, and whoever takes over in 2028 will be the one who has to live in the new network. The dramatic ending is the image of the empty hall of the North Atlantic Council. The chairs are there, the nameplates are there, but the room is dark. On the main screen, a single line of code is scrolling. Article 5 status, conditional, credits required, 3.0% GDP, standby for encryption key. This is the new NATO. It is lean, it is mean, and it is very, very expensive. The epic surrender in the Middle East and the massive move in Hormuz were just the warm-up acts. The main event is the total rewiring of Western power. And as the clock ticks toward the 2028 election, we are all realizing that the leader of the free world isn't a person anymore. It's the person who owns the server. The latest move by Trump to deactivate the automatic guarantee is the final admission that the US is over being a superpower. It is now a sovereign tech hub with a very large army. If you want to be its friend, you have to be its customer. The grip on Europe has been replaced by a service agreement. And as the oil war smoke drifts across the Mediterranean, the Allies are realizing that the agreement is the only thing standing between them and the great darkness.